Hello. Thank you, Laurel, and the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak at the ANS annual conference. I'm Jack Keilo. I hold a doctorate degree in geography and urban planning from the Sorbonne in Paris. I'm a university lecturer and cartographer. My research focuses on relations between states and place names and how power shapes place and community names. Today, I speak about the different names that are used for Orthodox Christians living in the Arab-speaking countries of the Levant. This community, as you can see in the map, is throughout the 4 countries of the Levant, with a big concentration around the coast, not far from the Mediterranean, especially in Lebanon and in central Syria. The ritual language is or are standard written Arabic and medieval Greek. For this community, I will show you the official logo of the Patriarchate of Antioch just before our return to this slide. So for the northern part of the Levant, Orthodox Christians follow the Patriarchate of Antioch. In the southern part, they follow the Patriarchate of Jerusalem, as you can see in this map. Then returning to the logo, the official logo of the Patriarchate of Antioch, here you can read that in English, the word used is Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, while in Arabic, the word is Rum, which is the medieval for Roman, the medieval Arabic word for Roman. So here there's an interesting difference in the translation. We use an ethnic name, an ethnonym, Greek, in English, but then in Arabic we use more rather the name of a political community, the Rum, the Romans. What is the origin of this difference? And when did it happen? In this presentation, I will speak about the different names of the community, which are Rome, which are Greek, and then the other very used name, which is Melkite, which is also a political name, and it practically means the same thing as Roman, you will see. And then I'm going to speak about other different other names. Beginning by the Rome, the demonym is the oldest name of the community, and it comes from Greek Ρωμαῖοι, which means the Romans, simply the citizens of the Roman Empire. In the year 212, Emperor Caracalla, in his Antonine constitution, or maybe more known as the Edict of Caracalla, granted the Roman citizenship to all free men of the Roman Empire. Rome has become the world. Here I'm quoting Saint Jerome of Stridon, the translator. Since then, the inhabitants of the Roman Empire all of them identify as Roman. Even before Constantine, most of the inhabitants of the Levant were Christians of Greek and Syriac cultures. After Constantine, in the region, Roman became equal and synonymous to Christian. Later, the word Rum was used in the Quran to signify both the Roman Empire and the Roman citizens. And after the Arab conquests, Muslims continued to use the word for the local population who identified themselves as Roman. So for the Rome themselves, for the Orthodox Christians living there themselves, the Greek-speaking among them, like John of Damascus and Cosmas of Mayuma, or the bilingual Greek-Arabic speakers, like Theodore Abukurra and Agapios of Hierapolis, all identified as Romans in their writings. And here it's important to say that the designation Roman and Rome was not ethnic. Many members of the community were indeed of ethnic Greek and ethnic Roman extraction. Most of them were of mixed Greco-Roman and Aramaic heritage. Some others were Syriac speaking, were Arab speaking, were of Arab extraction, of Jewish, of Armenian, of Caucasian, of Mesopotamian ethnic origins. The Roman law, before the arrival of the Arabs, did not recognize citizenship on the basis of ethnicity or origins, but then as a membership in a political community. So here the Rome or the Romans who lived under Islam, as the name denotes, it was to express a certain loyalty to the Roman Empire and the communion of faith with the Roman emperors in Constantinople. Here you can see the map, the reconquest, when the Roman Empire reconquered Cilicia, Antioch, and northern Syria. We do know that the local Orthodox Arabic-speaking population, they were considered full Romans by the Roman administration, by the imperial administration. And even elsewhere, Levantine Orthodox Christians identified as Romans. For example, during the Middle Ages, before the Mongol invasion, some Levantine Rome Christians migrated to Central Asia, and there the ecclesiastical jurisdiction that they themselves edified was called Romagiris, the Roman quarter. In other terms, clearly they did identify as Romans in that where they were. After the fall of the Roman Empire in 1453 and the Ottoman conquest of the Levant in 1517, the Rum became a part of the Rum millet of the Ottoman Empire. In other terms, they shared the same millet, the same big or greater community with all Orthodox Christians of the empire, with ethnic Greeks, with Bulgarians, with Serbs, and then with Georgians and with others. Till the 19th century, Levantine Orthodox Christians, when they spoke French and English, they tended to identify as Roman Orthodox and Romain Orthodox. We have some proofs from Beirut of the 19th century where a big part of the population were French-speaking, were Francophone. And when they spoke about themselves, they said Communauté Romaine Orthodoxe or Communauté Orthodoxe Romaine. But since the beginning of the British and French mandates in 1920s, the translation Greek Orthodox almost completely replaced the Roman Orthodox one. Yet the name Rome, Roman, is still the most used, if not exclusively, as an endonym by Levantine Orthodox Christians themselves when they refer to themselves and when they speak about themselves, even today. This is what about the demonym room. Now I will move to the second one, which is quite similar, but maybe it's more pejorative simply. It is the name Melkite, Melkaniyun or Melkaiyun or Malakiyun in Arabic. The word comes from the Arabic Malaki, which means royal or imperial, from Syriac Malka. And for the origin of the word, it comes from the Greek Vasilikos, for the first time attested in Alexandria after the Fourth Ecumenical Council in Chalcedon. Here you can see a painting of the Fourth Ecumenical Council with emperors, with Empress Pulcheria and her husband, Emperor Macian, Roman emperors in Constantinople. A 6th century historian, himself from Apamea in Roman Syria, Evagrius Scholasticus, says that the Patriarch Timothy was called Basilikos by the people of Alexandria. In other terms, he was called imperialist or royalist because he was of the Emperor Marcian and Empress Pulcheria's religious point of view. He was a Chalcedonian, while the local population in Alexandria was mostly anti-Chalcedonian. So the name was born as a derogatory term and used by non-Chalcedonians to refer to Chalcedonian Christians who professed the faith of the emperors. It was so more of an insult. With the arrival of the Arabs, the word was synonymously used with the word room. For example, we have Biruni, the famous historian and of the Middle Ages and geographer, who says that Christians are 3 sects. The Melkites, of them, the Melkites are the Romans and are called so as the emperor of the Romans professes their faith. All the Romans are Melkite. With the Arab conquest, around the time of the Arab conquest, the Rum themselves, the Orthodox Christians themselves adopted the name Melkite, as it was also a political statement to express the attachment to the faith of the Roman Empire and the loyalty to the faith of the Roman emperors. Much later, at the beginning of the 18th century, some members of the Church of Antioch broke away with the mother church and formed the Melkite Greek Catholic Patriarchate in communion or under the supervision of Rome, of the papacy. Since then, the name Melkite is mostly used by them, by the Greek Catholics, in Arabic, in French, and in English, Malakiyin, Melkite, and Melkite. It is still used by some Orthodox Christians, but yet it hasn't completely disappeared. At the same time, it's rare and it's mostly used when speaking about the historical context of the community. It's an interesting question why Greek Catholics chose to concentrate on, to focus on the demonym Melkite. Maybe because in the logic of the papacy, the word Roman has to be reserved to the Bishop of Rome, or maybe it's the influence of other Eastern Catholic communities who became uniates before the Greek Catholics, so they refer to them as Melkite. It is still a research to be done, yet to be elucidated. The third name, which is mostly used in the name that is most used in English and in French, Greek Orthodox, Hellenes or Hellenorthodoxy, which is the standard translation into most languages today. This name is medieval. The Roman Empire was popularly known, as you all know, the Empire of the Greeks in the West. So local Orthodox Christians during the Crusades were also known as Greeks. And later, since the beginning of the mandates, the official translation of the word Rome Orthodox in Arabic and Ρωμαῖοι in Greek, the official translation became Greek Orthodox and Grec Orthodox. Here you can see the logo of the Patriarchate of Jerusalem, the Orthodox Patriarchate, and it's written Eleanorthodoxon Patriarcheion, the Hellenic Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, literally speaking about the Greeks as an ethnicity. Even if in Arabic, the translation between Rome and Greek is not very clear, because the ethnic Greek in Arabic is Yunan and not Rome. These are the three big names used by the community itself in different languages: Rome, Melkites, and Greek Orthodox. There are other names also used, like Byzantine. I suppose that most of you are familiar with this. It's a conventional, yet erroneous, more or less erroneous name of the Eastern Roman Empire. It's the invention of the historian Hieronymus Wolff, and it was never used by the Eastern Romans themselves. Since the 20th century, this name is common among, to use it as a demonym is common, or as an adjective is common, but when speaking about the rite and the hymns. So the Byzantine rite, to speak about the Constantinopolitan rite, the Mass, how the Mass is said. Another name which is quite used is Antiochian, from the city of Antioch. The city of Antioch, the ancient seat of the Patriarchate. Today, the Patriarchate of Antioch is in Damascus, the Orthodox Patriarchate. In the past, it was in Antioch, so a city which is well known in the history of Christianity. The name Antiochian or Antiochians as a demonym was chosen, or as an ethno-religious name, was chosen in the 20th century because it's considered apolitical. It has no political connotation, and also it has no ethnic connotation. So the name was used as a neutral one. It brings less problems, or fewer problems than, Greek sometimes, or Roman, or whatever, because it has, it's free of all these historical connotations. There are some other curious, very political names: Arab Orthodox or Syrian Orthodox, and other names. Syrian Orthodox is mostly reserved to the Syriac Orthodox Church, but sometimes Eastern Orthodox Christians, Levantine Orthodox Christians use it, sometimes some of them. For Arab Orthodox, especially used in the southern part, it is, we can suppose it is in contrast and to oppose the Hellenic, the Greek Orthodox in this regard. These names are quite politicized, and I think I didn't have the time to speak about the history, how they were invented, putting quotation marks between quotation marks, how they were invented and how they are used and in what context. Here I put a typology so you can see the time and then the name. The oldest name, which is still in use, is Rome, the Roman one. Melkites, it's less in use. Greeks, it's in use, especially in English, but it is more recent than Roman for this community. I'm speaking, of course, about the Levantine Christians. Byzantines, which is used sometimes, as I told you, especially speaking about the rite and the hymns, and Antiochians, which is quite used, but it's a very recent name. It's the end of the 19th century. Here I can try to generalize or to ask some questions. Why did a political name turn into an ethno-religious one? And how does this apply to other communities in the Levant? The Druze community, it's the same. The Maronites, it's the same. There are also, there are similar cases. There's something here how a pejorative name, a derogatory term, can turn into an endonym, and why? The word Melkite, which means the same thing as Roman, but then instead of the identification by the citizenship, Roman citizenship, were identified by the emperor. So in other terms, it's more authoritarian as a name. But then the Rome themselves adopted it. So was it just to tease the others? Not only. What were the historical context in which they chose to adopt this name for themselves? And many other questions. It's still the beginning of research. I was more interested by toponyms, how religious communities write toponyms in interaction with the state and other actors. And now more and more by the names of the communities themselves, by the demonyms and the ethno-religious names. So it is still a research in beginning. There are many questions to answer. And thank you very much for listening. I'm ready if you have any questions.
Thank you. So we were dreaming past times and so traveling across time.
Oh, thank you.
And so for the time being, I guess there are no questions. I do have one.
Yeah.
I was wondering whether you have looked at to what extent how all these names refer to the community are reflected on maps. That is, community names, place names.
Actually, some of the place names in the Levant, most of my expertise on place names are in Lebanon and Syria, on the coastal side, actually, of the country, in Syria. Some of the place names, yes, they come from the mostly from the Roman name of the community. So we find place names, for example, like today in Beirut, Mustashfa Rum, the Roman hospital, literally. But then when we translate it into French, it's Hôpital Grec Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox hospital, and which dates back to the 19th century. Or we find a small region which is called the Irnat Rum, the Roman corner, because it is in a place surrounded by Maronite villages. So I think the Maronite villages called it in the past the Roman corner during Ottoman times, just to say that the inhabitants are Rum. They belong to another community.
We do find traces of these different names also in place names or names of institutions.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We do actually for the Rum Hospital. It's a place and an institution, because the whole quarter in Beirut is called the Rum Hospital.
I see.
It's quite interesting to see that the name of a small village founded by Romulus and Romulus is now used maybe around the Mediterranean. And I don't think that they have ever dreamed of this, the founders of the city of Rome.
Yeah, definitely. So
I suppose we are in the same time zone. I live in Paris. You're in Calabria.
Yeah. It's 9.
Yeah, it's 9. It's 1 minute to 9. Yeah.
Yeah, 1 minute to 9. Yeah. No, you were mentioning that you are at the beginning. Would you like to tell us what you'd like, how you'd like to go on with this project? What's next?
Yes. Actually, what's next? After the Rome community, I'm preparing an article about the subject. I think there will be other communities in the Middle East, and some of them, the exonyms that they have, for example, the Druze community, the word Druze began as a pejorative word. And for themselves, when they still call themselves the monotheist community. This is the official name, Wahideen in Arabic. But then they added Druze because everyone knows them under this name. So I have a project about the origins of other communities in the Middle East. Maybe it would be interesting to draw some parallels, or just to find, I don't think there's a pattern, but just to try to understand it in a comparative way, when these names appeared and why were they adopted by the community itself. For example, now I give the example of the Greek Orthodox. The name Melkite began as a pejorative name, but then how did it begin? How did it, or when did it become an endonym? When was it adopted by the community itself? I mean, what pushes a community to adopt a pejorative exonym, to appropriate this name? This would be interesting, because here I'm not speaking about an individual case. It's a collective case when a whole community decides to adopt a name.